the heaviest you got? Because people need to understand this, that you're not walking around close to 150.
Hell no.
Right? So, well, your off season pretty much ran what, like, I want to say a few years before you got lean, because you got lean once before that, but not staged lean.
Not quite as lean as that. So I've been bulking and cutting for so many years now that I've lost count, but I've always been known as the bear mode guy. And the reason why I look so impressive is because I was willing to go above 20% body fat. My off season weight before I did this shredded transformation was 200 pounds. So that's 50 pounds more than, 5'5", that's very heavy. And I certainly felt it. So usually I'll bulk to the 180s. I'm comfortable around 181 to 189. But this year, well, last year, you could say I took it to another level, gained that extra 10 pounds, and it really paid off. I wish I did it sooner. My absolute strength was at its highest. I just feel like I gained more muscle from it and I had better recovery. I like being fluffy when trying to gain muscle. Even right now, I'm back in the 180s, you know, so I've gained over 30 pounds since the competition. That happens relatively quickly as well. You get a spike and then it plateaus.
Depending on who I've spoken to, there's two lines of thought with that, right? And I can understand your thought process, and I've lived your thought process too with that. At a certain point in your journey, it becomes such a small percentage of growth as far as absolute weight on the bar, if you're tracking your lifts, right?
Of course.
As far as how you're feeling, and I don't know if when you're younger, you can get away with these heavier bulks. You can get too high with the bulk, but maybe there's an association with age where it's not the same as when you were 10, 15 years younger, like in your 20s. And I'm not talking about how you feel, because I know your preference for yourself, but what's your take on what you've heard some of the other bodybuilders talk? You've tuned into some of the episodes. You're aware there's two schools of thought there.
Yeah. So the other thought is you stay within 15 pounds of stage weight, but you're still bulking just slowly. So you're still getting all the benefits, right? And that makes sense. You know, I'm not gonna lie. If you track it perfectly, you'll make gains. It takes a lot of discipline though, because after you compete, you are starving. We put that exact weight that these guys are talking about in 1 month. So if they're doing it for the course of an entire off season, all respect. But I know that that's work. You're still not living life. I'll just say it straight up. But I think you're right about the age thing. Being in a calorie surplus probably does shorten your lifespan to a certain extent. The only protocol that's been proven to make you live longer is caloric restriction with micronutrient adequacy. So if you're in a surplus for the next 10 years, let's say between 30 and 40 years old, I don't think that's particularly good for you in the long run. But the thing is, if you did it in your early 20s, which maybe allowed you to maximize your growth, then you slowly taper off and then you just switch to traditional lean bulking, then you got most of the gains anyways. Doesn't matter if your progress is going to be a bit slower. In my case, I can definitely, in my 30s, I don't see myself bulking to 200 pounds anymore, because it does take a toll on the body. You're constantly eating, you feel bloated. It's not good for you. Even if you try to do it in a clean way, a surplus is a surplus, and you don't know the risk of that. You know, there's also possible sleep apnea, right? Even if you're not on drugs, you just get fatter everywhere. So there probably should be a body fat cap, and less aggressive bulks as you become more experienced makes sense to me. But the reason why I do it all the time is because honestly, it works better than anything I've ever tried. And even when you look at the data, you'll see that it's not a statistical significant difference, right? Lean bulkers versus dirty bulkers. And by the way, the studies don't define dirty bulking as a crazy surplus. It's usually like 5 or 15%. But the thing is, there's still a difference. Even when we're going beyond the topic of bodybuilding, now we're really talking a difference. And because I'm not just a bodybuilder, I love general strength. I bench press 405, the extra below makes a difference because your leverages are improved. So even if we can say on a lean tissue perspective, the gains can be comparable, the strength gains might not be. I would have never lifted the weights that I hit had I not bulked to those heavier body weights. And this is what powerlifters do all the time. They up a weight class. And we're even seeing some naturals now who are gaining 100 pounds, let alone 50, and that's taking their gains to a whole new level. You're going to look fat in the process. You're going to have some loose skin when you cut down. Sure, it's not as aesthetic, but what you're putting on the bar, it's a cheat code. It's the final card. Gain all that weight and you can't fail. And one more thing about that, bulking holds you to the highest level of accountability on the programming side of things. Because if you're not making gains, if you're still plateauing on your numbers, then you don't know how to train. So some would argue that bulking is a sign that you don't know how to train because the surplus itself is just automatically getting you bigger. But the thing is, if you're getting bigger without the strength gain, then it's precisely the opposite of what these people are arguing. If you're not making gains in the surplus, then you don't know how to train. But if you are making gains, the surplus is just fueling that progressive overload in an optimal way. So
I went through those heavy aggressive bulks and I saw benefit from that. That's no doubt about it.
For sure.
And now that I'm in my 30s, especially, I didn't feel that same benefit anymore. So like that's just the truth, man. And it's had nothing to do with the training, was still the training. It's not that. I felt sluggish. I felt slow. I felt like I did not feel feel good at the weight that once I was thriving at. And I do wonder if it's an age-related factor, but I don't want to blame it on age either, right? But there could be something to explore there. Maybe it's the fact that growth is just not as linear as it is when you're younger. So is majority of that just fat, and maybe that's why it's feeling more sluggish?
Yeah, it's also what you eat. Heart disease starts at 10 years old, and a lot of bodybuilders, I mean, I'm not going to comment on your diet because I don't know all the intricacies and whatnot, but a lot of bodybuilders follow these bro diets that probably aren't that good for you in the long term, and they're deniers of a lot of things that I won't really get into today. So maybe if they had those foods in a normal quantity, like in a maintenance calorie context, or even a calorie deficit, they'd be fine. But because they're eating those same foods in a surplus, now that's what's causing problems. And after 10 years, the health issues are coming into play. And you'd be surprised how many even natural bodybuilders have high cholesterol and high blood pressure. And they're on the road to heart disease, despite being natural, because their diet is,
they're basically in a surplus and they're eating like crap. That makes sense to me, actually. Yeah, that would take some thinking back and analyzing what was my last.
Like if you really analyze what you ate during those bulks, maybe it's more so the food and the quantity of it.
You could be right about this, because the other thing is, and I was bringing this up with, I think it was Nigel St. Louis, great natural bodybuilder. And we were talking about the fact that when you're bulking, you can trick yourself almost like it's an excuse, like, let's order burgers and fries. Like, come on, bro. Burgers, fries, like from a you know, they're deep frying it in like who knows what oil. And then you wonder, and you're eating that sometimes twice a week, and then you eat like just crappy foods, man, that the thing
is like, you know, it's going to fuel your progress in the gym. So, what's one little cheat meal going to do? But the thing is, it's not one. It's multiple cheat meals add up over several months and then years, and then you have a health problem. So I can understand why guys would feel sluggish. There's also the biological age. If you're speeding up all the mechanisms, then it makes sense why you can't tolerate certain things, like when you were 19 or whatever.
If you took your bulk as seriously as you took your cut from a whole foods perspective, assuming you're doing that, right? Maybe, and you've got me thinking that you might actually thrive if you're doing maybe a slightly more aggressive bulk. If you're someone who hovers, like you said, 10 to 15 pounds away from stage weight, and you're only in your 30s, I can understand the 50-year-old who's competing every other year or every year, like they want to stay leaner. They're not really building much muscle at that point, assuming they've been consistent for so many years, right? Some of these pro level natural bodybuilders that in their 50s, like, okay, I can understand it. But even then, bump up the calories, but keep everything as far as the quality the same, and just see how you operate.
I think that would be the best way to go about it. But at the end of the day, a surplus is a surplus, and that in itself might not be longevity promoting. But if the foods themselves are really good, that's going to beat the alternative for sure. Let's just be honest. Most guys, actually, I would say all of them, have never done like a perfect bulk where all the variables were tracked, unless they're older.
Even then, like, are you really tracking to know exactly how much of a surplus? I know that obviously energy expenditure is different day to day, but like you do when you're cutting, like you're keeping things pretty rigid, right? Okay, let's do that, but in a surplus. How much of a surplus? Well, let's do the math and try to be somewhere in a range that maybe it is not so negative as far as like you were mentioning, where if it's too aggressive, it's not such a negative effect from a longevity standpoint, like from a health perspective, right?
All I would say is that all the best naturals that I've ever seen have done a serious bulk in their lifetime. Even if at one point they decide to cut things back, and I'm certainly going to get there. I know it. I won't be doing this. I can't gain 50 pounds every time. It's too much. Right. Maybe 20 tops, right? I always say like, this is the bulk where I'm only going to gain this much fat. It never happens because the gains are too good. I would say that you can't be contradictory. You can't cease to acknowledge your roots, because that's what got you there. And you can't definitively state that you would have been in the same spot had you not done the bulk.
That's true.
Yeah, when I look around, it's just a trend.
As far as what people are saying, as far as staying leaner,
as far as the results, and it's easy to say I'll just stay shredded year round or close to it, but in practice, it's much harder to do. And I don't think a lot of guys have what it takes to go through that pain. Even though we can say that most of the side effects is from the calorie deficit itself, there's still an independent factor to being at a very low body fat. Like, I don't think for a second that my gains would be optimal being at 10 to 12% body fat versus say 15% body fat. It's not that far off. Physiologically, you do feel the difference.
That makes it.
And your leverages are better and whatnot. So you don't have to get fat, but being on the edge of, say, closer to your end stage fluffy weight is going to do more for you than the opposite, being closer to shredded.
If you're not losing weight / body fat and you're not gaining weight / body fat, then what's really happening there? Like, you're just sitting at a comfortable place, which is maybe maintenance. And then if you're just maintaining and that's not the goal, and you're wondering why nothing's happening, well, because you're literally maintaining. So there has to be some, So, and I know that's obvious, but maybe for someone listening that got some wheels turning, right? If nothing's moving on either end of the spectrum, how can you be sure anything's happening?
These people are just going to say that the stimulus wasn't adequate enough, or that you hit your so-called so-called genetic limit. I've seen that with some 25-year-olds that maybe they started lifting at 15 and they refuse to gain weight. They're always in a maintenance phase and they're like, yeah, I hit my genetic limit. This is it. But it's like, no, you didn't. You got to bulk again, buddy. And it doesn't take much. Even the smallest surplus. Guys who claim that they make great gains with maintaining, quote unquote, they actually are gaining fat, just at a very small rate. Let's say you put on 4 pounds of fat in a year, which is nothing. Actually, let's look at myself. Back in 2019, I weighed around 160 pounds. I was doing cardio every day for 6 months straight. And I slowly went from 160 to 169 over the course of a year, basically. That's very slow weight gain. I had abs the whole time. I was lean. I was strong. Everything was amazing from a progression standpoint. But on a month-to-month basis, you look exactly the same. And by the end of the year, like, what's 9 pounds, including water weight? You know, it's a joke. I would have told you that I was eating in a maintenance phase, but I wasn't. It was obviously a very minute calorie surplus that added up over time. So I think those guys can see results, but just pure like perfection, I'm going to eat 2,000 calories a day for next year. Yeah, good luck making progress with that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the natural bodybuilders who I've spoken to, of course, who do reside on the end of the spectrum where they're staying leaner, they're also a lot older, you know, and they have a different perspective on things now because they're a lot older. Like you said, it would be interesting to just go back in time for a second and see, hey man, you've literally bulked up in this time period. That made a difference. Physique. I think it was Lyle McDonald. The first 5 years is like where a lot of the gains are being made. It was in your first 5 years of productive training, not just 5 years.
Productive, exactly. Most guys never had productive training.
And then the rest is just a small, it's percentages that you're chasing, of course.
It's diminishing returns. So you might gain 2 pounds of muscle a year, best case 5. Alberto Nunez also said that you get these spurts once in a while. If you gain, let's say you're on year 10 and you put on 2 pounds of muscle on year 11, it's very possible that on year 12 you put on 5 pounds of muscle. You would think that's not the case, but sometimes it just works out that way. We saw with Alberto.
That's true with his back. Like you saw it in his back too. Yeah,
we literally saw it. And if I look at my journey, just last year, well, I bulked. I did a serious one. That was one of my most productive bulks yet, getting up to 200 pounds. And I feel like I did put on at least 5 pounds of muscle. Why? Because I learned more about biomechanics. I started training more like a bodybuilder with certain things, higher proximity to failure, whatnot. And I went harder on my legs. You know, I wasn't just doing barbell squats and conventional deadlifts, you could say. It went beyond like powerlifting type training. So even at a high level, there's always something you can improve upon. And just by raising all those things collectively, you'd be surprised what that could equate to in terms of a yearly muscle increase. I didn't think I could put on 5 pounds of muscle in a year, but I did after 10 plus years.